Hi there and welcome to this video on JavaScript. In this video, we are going to talk about a very simple technique in JavaScript which is called as hoisting. Hoisting basically means that JavaScript brings all your declarations to the top. Now to the naked eye, it may sometimes appear as if we are using the variables even before declaring them. But the truth is that under the hood, it's hoisting which is responsible for the same. So to understand this concept, let's first see what are the different states a variable can be in. So in JavaScript, a variable can either be declared but not initialized. The second state could be that a variable is both declared as well as initialized. And then the third step is that it has been used also. So a use could be, let's say we are using it to log somewhere or probably in some function or something like that. Before we look into any examples, let's also understand that in case of const, because the initialization and declaration, they both happen at the same step or they both happen together, so there seems to be no concept of hoisting. I mean, even though hoisting is there, but it is not clearly visible because of this fact, as hoisting is only concerned about the declaration of variables and not about the initialization part. Okay, so let's look at some of the examples of the same. So in this first example, here I'm trying to console.log z. Now this will throw a reference error. The reason being that we have not declared z yet, but we are trying to log it. Okay, so here I will try to run the same. So I will type node 002 variable.js, and now when I hit return, I can see this reference error that z is not defined. Okay, so I will comment it for now. So the next interesting question is that what if we declare a variable but we do not initialize it? So that is what we are doing here. We have a var a and then we say console.log a. Now we have declared the variable but we have not initialized it. So I will again type node 002 variable.js. Okay, so it has started giving me an error regarding something, but we can ignore it for now. If we look at the top steps, we see that we have undefined, so which means that a was declared but it was not defined, so by default it is undefined. So let's move down now. So this is another interesting example. Here I'm trying to use console.log value, but unlike the above example, here the value will not throw a reference error. Instead it will be undefined because of hoisting, because I am defining var value is equal to 10 here, which means this declaration will move to the top because of hoisting, and that's why instead of giving me a reference error, the value on logging value I'm getting undefined. But here, because we already have both declaration as well as initialization, I will actually see 10, just like we can see here. So moving further down, talking about let, well, let is an ES6 feature. So if I try to do the same thing with let, I still see a reference error. The reason being temporal dead zones, a concept which says that as long as something is not initialized, it happens to be in a temporal dead zone wherein we cannot access it. So we can see here that cannot access something before initialization, which means that in case of let, I will need to initialize the variable, and as long as it is not initialized, it is going to throw a reference error because of the idea of temporal dead zones. Next, coming to the functions, let's see whether hoisting works for my functions as well. So I'm going to clear my console. Now here we can see that I'm going to call the runMe function even before it is declared. So let's see if it works or not. So if I type node 003 function 1.js, I see that hello world has been printed, which means that the declaration of this function has been moved to the top by the concept we are talking about, that is hoisting. Okay, let's move ahead. And here we have an example wherein we are using a function as an expression. So let's see what happens here. I'm going to uncomment this code and let's just run node 004. Okay, we can see that type error run me is not a function. Well, hoisting is definitely happening here, but as we discussed earlier, that the default value for a var, any declaration, would be undefined. So even though the declaration has been moved up, but run me is still undefined, and that's why the functions which are actually expressions, which means we are assigning those functions to some variables, hoisting works there. But because of the fact that only declaration moves to the top and not the initialization, so that is the reason that this function is not yet defined. Okay, so here is what we discussed throughout this video. So yeah, what is hoisting? It's behavior of JavaScript to move variables, functions and class declarations, etc. to the top. And so there is a state called as undefined, which says that something which is defined, but something which is declared but not yet defined. And we see a reference error when something is neither declared and nor defined. And as we saw in the video, that var is always hoisted, but ESX doesn't allow variable before it is initialized, and that's the reason that we don't see the similar behavior in case of let. And because in case of const we have to initialize it at the same time when we are declaring it, so hoisting practically becomes infeasible in case of const. And in functions also we saw that functions are also hoisted, but when we are using functions as expressions, then they are not hoisted. I hope you liked this video on hoisting, and thank you so much for watching this video.